For every man in pursuit of becoming the person God has designed for him to become, that 2.0 version of self, there lies a deeper why within the nature of chasing that new identity. And for I and so many other young men, it usually stems from having a messed up past, heartbreak, and always living up to other standards instead of your own, struggling with lust and other sinful addictions, intense insecurity within your appearance and overall self-image. It's why creating that 2.0 self back when I was at rock bottom, it finally gave me a reason to detach from that misaligned past, allowing me to finally start going after something that I had a burning passion for. Not because anyone told me to, but because I knew deep down I owed it to myself. And while this sounds like some motivational story about discipline or self-mastery, I'm actually here to explain the harsh truth behind this type of lifestyle. Because creating and chasing that new identity is often used as a coping mechanism, a means to avoid addressing the root cause of your pain, believing you can outrun your past by obsessing over your future. Basically, failing to accept your current and past selves within pursuing a new self. Why after 2 years of just chasing that new identity, achieving goal after goal within getting into the best shape of my life, finally starting to post on social media, living the self-improvement lifestyle, growing my relationship with God, I realized even with the insane amount of external progress I'd made, all this time I've still yet to fully heal those inner wounds from my past. 2 years I've been silently just avoiding and refusing to confront the root of my pain. It was genuinely through deep self-reflection that I could come to a realization such as this. So I wanted this video to essentially be me reading out my own journal entry in relation to this discovery that I've made. Keep it real, honestly a bit uncomfortable, seeing as I'm basically just exposing my past and my own recent, inner battles. But it's genuinely what God has called me to do within just being fully transparent about my struggles within, these videos. Documenting and sharing everything I learned as part of this current 365-day journey towards aligning to that 2.0 self. But above all, I want this video to make you question whether you've been avoiding your own wounds, trying to build on a broken foundation of just unhealed pain and trauma, chasing short-term relief without ever genuinely experiencing long-term healing. Because in realizing this is how I've been subtly living since 2024, I can imagine it's something so many other young men experience within pursuing that best version of themselves, whether they realize it or not. But enough rambling, here's the journal entry that has genuinely opened my eyes as of recently. For context, I like to personally journal digitally, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I've got multiple journals in which, I write, handwritten. But when it comes to, these journals where I'm essentially just yapping, I'm really just trying to deconstruct my beliefs. For doing them digitally 100%. On top of that, I always like to follow a specific structure within these journals, so that way it's not just me yapping to myself and there's actually, a real intention behind it, aka deconstructing my beliefs and thus identifying how to uproot those misaligned beliefs so I can step into alignment with that 2.0 self. You feel me? Was that the situation that I'm referencing within the journal itself was based on just a recent, family event involving, my brother and my parents. And overall, it was just, it was pretty stressful, and it evidently triggered, pain from my past, hence why I felt the need to just journal about it. But let's dive right in. I'm probably gonna have it up on the screen right here next to me so you guys can see it. First of all, specific area of misalignment, right? What's the overarching thing that I've identified as, a weakness or just something that needs to be realigned within myself? And so in this case, it was noticing that I still carry beliefs and reactions to adverse circumstances associated with who I was post-heartbreak. Here, just a thought dump, basically. This is kind of like the yapping portion, so I'm probably gonna just try and speed through this, but this whole situation with brother abruptly showing up at our apartment has truly revealed that I'm still clinging onto certain beliefs from back then, Even beyond that, I've always acknowledged how certain instances reignite those negative feelings and emotions regarding the whole breakup process. Heart rate going up whenever I see people from my past, the random dreams I'd have about her and others from back then, always finding myself noticing women that resemble her in certain ways at work. The list goes on and on. I'm exposing myself, right? I'm genuinely exposing myself, but this is what it takes, just being honest and vulnerable with yourself especially, but even just me holding myself accountable on here. It's like, it shows that I'm truly committed to detaching from these beliefs, these limiting beliefs that are holding me back from stepping into who I know I'm meant to become. Anyway, all this time it feels like I've been suppressing and brushing off the fact that I still act in this way. And so it reinforces to me that identity-wise, I cannot fully act in alignment with Bryan 2.0 unless I address these spiritual constraints. And so as it relates, especially with the whole situation with brother, I see now that I have a huge problem with trying to put up a front or facade and just hide my real feelings. And I see this largely stems from how back then she essentially put up a facade and opted to hide her true feelings from me until the very last minute, right, in relation to my breakup. And while this isn't the bigger picture, it's a good place to start with in unpacking these misaligned beliefs that continue to trap me in this old identity. So you see, I'm telling you, like, when you're able to journal in this manner, it's so powerful. And obviously you'll see kind of how the rest of it goes, where it's essentially just me asking myself question after question after question, right? Basically spamming why, just trying to understand the deeper reasons, the underlying factors behind why I still cling on to these beliefs from my past. Questions, it starts off with, why is it that brother's arrival bothers me so much? The nature of it was random and unfair towards how it is me, mine, Bar currently living, right? Me and my parents. Why is it unfair? Ba especially has to go out of his way to attend to him even through all the stress that's already being piled onto him. Why does this relate to my heartbreak? I initially felt the need to rely and depend on others in the midst of my pain in the same way that my brother is now relying on us to, accommodate his needs. Why did I feel that need? Because I was still attached to seeking external validation, plus couldn't fully lean on myself during that difficult time. Why couldn't I lean on myself? So you see, I'm just trying to really just hone in and figure out what it is that's going on, under the hood. And why couldn't I lean on myself? My self-worth and image were largely shattered and broken from having lost that relationship. Why was it broken? I was attaching a lot of my identity and who I was towards that relationship. Why does this relate to the present day triggers related to her and my past? There's evidently still an aspect of my identity I'm attaching towards that past relationship. Why would this be the case? I never fully gave myself permission to process the emotions and instead resorted to self-improvement and optimization as a way to run from my old self. That's deep. That's deep. As a result, I masked the pain with feature chasing and improvement, but never truly experienced that spiritual healing. Why did I mask the pain with self-improvement and optimization? I figured that would be enough to detach from my old ways, but it only consisted of the external, not the internal. Why did I believe that would be enough? My self-worth was tied towards changing my external habits and behaviors instead of who I was internally. Essentially fixating on doing instead of being. My worth more so tied towards doing instead of being. Conditioning from parents and past relationships to feel validated based on the things that I did instead of who I genuinely was. There are those that have strongly conditioned me hold the most power over my inner and spiritual health. As a result, there's deep insecurity and subtle resentment towards, my parents, my past relationship, and as of recent, self-optimization, self-improvement. Why do I feel that insecurity and resentment towards these external, conditioners? I hate feeling as though I'm overly dependent and reliant on others and external forces. Why do I hate that? Because it never allowed me to truly be myself and embrace my authenticity and individuality. But dependence isn't the problem. Dependence on the wrong things is. Dependence was always on the world, aka the external, instead of God and just the internal. Why can't I fully embrace my true self? In certain ways, I'm still not fully dependent on God. Identity is still attached towards seeking that dependence elsewhere. And so it's things like this where it's like, it's genuine, like I even had to like stop and just process it for a second, because it's like, not like, it's so difficult for you to like come to these realizations and these harsh truths about yourself unless you commit yourself to just, deeply reflecting on, the things in your life in which, those areas in which you feel struggling, where it just feels like you have this resentment, just buried within you, this pain that needs to be healed. Continuing on, where am I placing my dependence in misalignment from God then? Ego, others through, external judgments, online creators, who have the success that I want. It was this third one that really hit me, right? Avoidance. All of these things reinforce fear and avoidance as a means for short-term relief. Relying on my ego is essentially me avoiding my heart and own intuition. Relying on others is essentially avoidance of trusting myself. And so at the root of my pain regarding my heartbreak lies avoidance, specifically embodying the identity of a man that avoids the root cause of his issues, helps to chase the symptoms instead to create this illusion of healing. After these thought dumps like this, where then I really begin to hone in on like, okay, how is it that I can actually, take action upon this? So it starts off with just a list of questions that I go through, starting off with what is the misaligned belief? Seeing as beliefs equal identity, the misaligned belief at hand largely comes down to believing that avoidance of confronting deeper pain and issues via chasing external gain would somehow resolve it. From here, this is where things really pick up, because now I'm asking myself, okay, what is the deeper belief that reinforces the initial one? Because the thing is with, limiting misaligned beliefs like these is that there is a reason why you have that sort of belief, and that it's trying to protect you from something, right? Because if you didn't have that belief, then it thinks that, basically your life would just go in complete shambles and your identity would be completely shattered and broken. But obviously, usually it's not the case, but once you only realize that once you actually identify and understand the belief. So it's through this that the deeper belief I realized, okay, like I asked myself, if I didn't believe that avoidance was the antidote to my pain, what would happen? I realized that I'd be forced to actually confront my inner battles instead of running away from them. And so the deeper belief in this case that reinforces that initial one of believing that, avoidance will resolve my pain, it's believing that confrontation of my pain to actually heal is worse than creating that illusion of healing via transforming externally but not internally. I ask myself, is this belief aligned with me moving closer towards Bryan 2.0? And obviously not, right? Definitely not, seeing as it's caused me to reject my old identity and pain rather than learn to accept and embrace it to actually start building from a strong, healed foundation. For me, 2.0 alignment is all about blending your past, present, and future identities through accepting your past self, embracing your present/current self, and aligning towards that future 2.0 self. The thing is, I've been so caught up on the future that the present and past selves have been neglected completely due to running from my past, plus continuing to allow the pain from them to drain my spirit and overall well-being in the present. So now I'm shifting from what is essentially misaligned to now, okay, how can I actively realign myself now towards that 2.0 self and away from that old identity? What beliefs would I already possess if I achieved my current goal? In this case, the goal is to detach from the beliefs that I've been continuing to carry from my previous heartbreak. Belief in conjunction with that goal would then pertain to believing that I am a man that actively confronts his inner battles and seeks to address the root cause instead of the symptoms of pain for long-term health and real mind, body, soul alignment. Just like how I like to end all of these videos with an actionable for alignment, that's essentially what I do at the end of these journals as well, in terms of asking myself, what actions would I be taking in accordance with the above beliefs? Actions stem from your thoughts and your thoughts stem from your beliefs. So it's essentially through your beliefs that you then understand what action needs to be taken. For me, I realized like doing more of these journals, right? Journaling with the intention to deconstruct misaligned beliefs, seeing as beliefs equals the root of all misalignment, and that they shape your identity and how you view yourself. And beyond that, it's also approaching goals from the lens of addressing the root cause and focusing on those high ROI needle movers. Within my nutrition, a recent problem that I'm trying to overcome is, skin issues, specifically like on my hair and my scalp. Because, for so long I've always struggled with that in terms of like having, like sebderm, having flakes, dandruff, all that. And so I realized that the root for that is essentially my digestion and gut health. But then it's also asking myself, okay, what do I believe that causes me to continue having poor digestion? Because it's not as simple as that, right? There's underlying beliefs that reinforce this thing of like, yeah, my digestion isn't good. Yeah, my gut health's not good. Then it starts diving into, the beliefs that I have around food and nutrition overall. So with training, I've been also recently trying to address this problem of poor posture, right? For just years and years, early on, just terrible form within powerlifting, especially, that essentially messed up my posture when I started hitting the gym. So been trying to dial in on that as of late, but the root for that is just a lack of rib cage and trunk mobility, right? So just, my ribs are not in the proper place, right? They lack mobility. And so it's then asking myself, okay, what do I believe that prevents me from improving my mobility? And then with content especially, another problem I've been experiencing is too much time, just recording and editing these videos. And so the root for that is just simply a lack of structure and intention within the creative process. And then once again, I'm just trying to understand, okay, what is the belief that is reinforcing this, right? The problem isn't necessarily like, this certain structure or content system. It's the fact that there are beliefs I have that are preventing me from adopting these things fully and integrating them within my current identity, right? Largely because it's certain things related to how I used to think, things I used to believe in. I was asking myself, like, what do I believe that causes me to spend an unnecessary amount of time on content? But yeah, that's essentially the journal in full, right? I identify those actionables for alignment for myself. That kind of marks the end of the journal, right? In the same way with these videos. But overall, it was through this journal that I understand now more than ever this need to align my identity more towards anti-avoidance, right? Actively confronting my problems before actually going out and fixating on these other desirable traits that I want. It largely comes down to actually focusing on what I need and not what I want. Over the past 2 years of me just chasing what I want in terms of the physique, the personal brand, the mindset, the overall lifestyle, chasing the mental and physical attributes of the man I want to become, but while avoiding the necessity to align myself spiritually towards that version of myself. What I truly need is to heal my heart and soul in a way that naturally allows me to then heal and rebuild both my mind and body from a strong foundation that produces long-term authentic success within my fitness, within my content, instead of short-term inauthentic success. So for this video's actionable for alignment, I want to open the opportunity for you to just reflect on your own journey thus far. Looking back on how far you've come from who you once were to who you are now. Through that, I want you to identify the specific identity that is most tied to, most attached to that old version of yourself that you could potentially still be operating from within the present day. Take it all the way back to when you first started out on that journey towards becoming your best self. Me, obviously, it was after, that heartbreak, right? That bad breakup. And so for you, just identify the event that sparked that desire for more. I strongly encourage you to do, a similar style of journaling as I showed within the video, of just repeatedly asking yourself question after question to really just peel back the layers of just your subconscious and really hone in on those limiting, misaligned beliefs. To finally reveal your most raw baseline self. It was the identity of a man that chooses avoidance over confrontation and external gain over inner healing. Basically, since you and God are genuinely the only ones that can identify and uproot that misaligned identity within yourself, all I can really do is just empower you to finally start leaning on that higher power so you can stop avoiding and finally confront that potential pain. Finally break any and all attachments to your old identity before you go out chasing new future identities. Same exact way he encouraged me to do so through writing this journal entry and now sharing it on here. Yeah, that's a wrap. This resonated or genuinely gave real value, of course I'm just going to continue sharing my own lessons and insights as part of 365 Align, aka my current year-long protocol of just allowing God to align me towards that 2.0 self, building my mind and body from that soul-oriented foundation to finally align all three of these pillars for real authentic self-mastery. Nonetheless, thank you for watching. Like, sub, all that good stuff. Till then, stay aligned.